look, I'm going to be honest with you, and I've already said this, and I'll say it one more time. I don't think there's anything wrong with you deconstructing their faith. I don't think there's anything wrong with you questioning certain things, questioning certain things that you've seen, behaviors, actions, what you've heard all your life, as long as
your goal
your goal at the end of the day is to come to Jesus, to come back to the centrality of the scriptures, to come back to the centrality of who he is and what he's calling you to do, to come back to the church, to a Bible believing, healthy, spirit filled church, and be in a place where you can continue to live out your faith and contribute your gifts and be utilized. That at the end of the day, I think is healthy.
Yeah.
And I think it's necessary for many people. Do you remember Clap On, Clap Off? Were you around then?
Yes.
That was like, when that technology came out, that was like AI for my generation.
That was the Alexa.
That was the Alexa.
Yeah. That was the Alexa.
It was the Alexa. It was the Alexa.
Yeah.
You would just clap.
It sensed your clapping, and it would turn the lights on or off.
I used that for an illustration for a sermon, and I had to go YouTube to find the commercials.
The commercial?
Were you there?
Yeah.
And I played the commercial?
Yes.
Anyways, I love that. We should actually consider bringing that back, because I don't have to pull out my phone. Anyways.
Right.
We should bring it back.
The clapper?
Yeah.
I'm so down.
We could
because it would only control the lights. Like Alexa be controlling the whole household.
Yep, it'd be like Dutch
we don't even
Brothers,
ever set up at our house because I can't handle all that. But anyway,
I'm just saying. Well, anyways, we're hey, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching, liking, subscribing, and for being here.
For sticking with us.
Sticking with us, for hanging with us.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually episode 5, but it's really part 2.
Honestly, it feels like episode 52. I'm not gonna lie. Now, it feels like we've been in it for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And which is good.
Yeah. Well, this is part 2 of the episode 4 in a sense.
Yeah.
Kind of. I mean, we're in the same clothes.
They do.
Do you think they notice?
They do. We are not doing 4 outfit changes. Let's just talk about that because
unless Jimmy
Lord.
Choo is willing to sponsor.
No, not even. I don't want to go through the work of doing it.
Gosh.
So, this is kind of like a part 2. We just felt like it would flow. The topic that we discussed in the last episode, you're going to have to watch it if you want this one to make sense completely, I think, because it kind of is like that beginning layer of it.
Yeah, like who watches Return of the Jedi without watching?
Absolutely, I would have to start at the beginning. You don't just start at Return of the Jedi. I have no clue what's going on if I jump in now.
Kyle, you don't start at Return of the Jedi, do you?
No.
No? All right, see, that's what I'm saying. No. So don't start at... Anyways.
Yeah.
Empire Strikes Back right here, ladies and gentlemen. So we are having a conversation today off of something that for a while has been like a super crazy buzzword. So many people have probably done podcasts on it. Carrie Newhoff has written about it.
Took off in 2020.
And we felt like we really needed to have a conversation because I don't think we're out of the weeds yet, and I don't necessarily know if it is. But we wanted to have a conversation regarding the purpose of deconstruction and reconstruction of our faith. And I think the best way would be to really just share us.
Deconstruction?
Yeah. So I know that right before we planted the collective, there was a season where we were just kind of done with ministry. I shared that in a podcast.
Yes.
We weren't done with...
we weren't done with the bride. We were done working for the bride, is what you said.
For the bride, that's right. I couldn't remember. But I know that the period there was a lot of us breaking down and deconstructing what we had known to be ministry, what we had known to be leadership, what we had known to be pastors.
What we had known to be faith.
To be what?
Faith.
To be faith?
Yeah, what faith was to us based on what we had been conditioned to believe.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, what it was to do exactly what Ashley just said. And I think there was a lot of breaking down and undoing. I think that our journey definitely took us through some amazing moments and yet some toxic moments. Some things that could have been self-inflicted, but a majority of them that weren't. We're willing to take the onus where we need to take the onus.
Yeah.
But I felt like if this was my thought, if this is what ministry looks like, if this is what being a part of the church looks like, I want nothing to do with it anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Kind of over it, yeah.
And that's where we were. And we got out of it, obviously. I don't know. You look like were you going to say something about that?
No, I'm listening.
And I think it took us almost a little under a year to really rethink, go to the scriptures, process, pray, deal with frustrations, deal with disappointments, deal with anger, deal with rage, deal with, just probably hate, and deal with all of these things before we can be back at a place to do what we're doing. Because I will tell you this, the pastor that I am today at 41 is not the same pastor that I was at 37, 36, 25, 28. Completely different.
Yeah.
But I feel like my framework is completely different. And I think more biblically accurate.
Yeah. I would say that the follower of Jesus that I am today, like so much of who I was when I first started following the Lord as a teenager, and the way that I functioned because it was what I was taught, is like so opposite of who I've learned God to be in my life.
Well, you said something. I think for me it became, Paul says, follow me as I follow Christ. And I felt like I was following people who I don't know if they were necessarily following Christ. And I think I stopped pursuing Christ and wasn't essentially following him to the extent that he called us to. But to be honest, there's a lot of people that have left the church.
Yeah.
They've left the faith. They've radically gone the complete opposite way in the midst of deconstruction. All you have to do is look at TikTok, Instagram.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's inundated.
Just even within their church, you see people who are creating accounts of I'm a recovering Christian or recovering pastor, and you see a lot of the content, and a lot of it is fueled from anger, from frustration,
which is okay.
No, it totally is. But
it's totally okay to be there.
I love what Carey Nieuwhof said. He said, deconstruction without reconstruction is a tragedy.
Yes.
So although you deconstruct,
you
still have to reconstruct your faith, I think, according to Scripture, not according to your feelings, not according to what you think is morally and accurate and correct, not what you think fits the narrative of the season and where you're living at, but what is biblical, what is biblically accurate, and how do I reframe and reform my belief according to Scripture?
Yes. I think if anything, healthy deconstruction, or at least finding health at some point on the journey.
So do you think it's healthy to deconstruct?
I do think it's healthy
because there's also pastors that don't.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I think, I think there's nothing wrong with it. And
I don't think there's anything wrong with it because I've had to do it. You've had to do it. I think that it is healthy because we have, especially I think the longer you've been in the church, like if this is something that you've spent the majority of your life in, there's a lot of things that we have been conditioned to believe and have been taught that are not necessarily aligned correctly with Scripture. They're misaligned. There's things I think that were taught because it benefited that ministry to believe it that way, or it benefited the pastor to believe it that way. I think when I was first involved in local church ministry, I was a young teenage girl, meaning I was super impressionable.
Honey, you're still young.
And I'm not that young, but I think of who I was at the time and who the people were around me, right? Like the people that I was involved in church with and first involved with youth ministry, or was in youth ministry myself as a youth student. And so much of what I believed, I believe the Lord drew me to him for sure. I believe the Lord at that age, at that time in my life, that is when he developed a lot of things that I'm still doing today and I'm passionate about today, like prayer and intercession, all those things, right? And a love for people. That was me from the get-go. However, there were a lot of things that I believed simply because somebody told me to believe them. And the people usually were people that I looked up to that had power and influence and things that can be great, but they're not so great when they're being used for selfish gain. Right. And so I had to really allow the Lord to break down the made up theology.
As you were talking, I was thinking what's the theology of deconstruction? Where do you see it? And I'm using the vocabulary deconstruction and reconstruction, and I'm going to use it, and it might make some people upset, but I think that when Jesus, says the word became, the message, the word became flesh and moved into the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Jesus lived amongst us. He walked amongst us. He called the 12 disciples, and he would do all these crazy things. But I think what Jesus was really doing was he was deconstructing the pharisaical ways of religiosity.
Yeah.
And he was building it back up in the pure form of love and on the word and introducing grace.
Yes.
And he was rebuilding it the right way. And so he had to,
break
who is
it
this
down.
guy that he heals on the Sabbath?
Yeah.
Who is this guy that he forgives people's sins?
He had to challenge
Who is this guy
Yeah.
that, his disciples who are with him, they're not fasting. Like, all the legalistic people were upset because it challenged their form of control.
Yeah.
And their form of being able to manipulate and have their own gain.
Yeah.
And it was giving people a different perspective to see God for who he really was, who he really is, and what he really desired to do in their lives.
Yeah. He made the people, the religious people, the people who clung to their theology more than to him,
their own theology and their man-made rules.
Their own rules, their own laws. They clung more tightly to that than to the Messiah who was in front of them. And so I think that he was the OG of deconstruction.
OG.
You know what it was? He was not
Did
afraid.
You really just say OG?
Do
you remember that song by Ice-T, OG, Original Gangster?
Yes.
Don't ever listen to that, guys.
No, we're not saying add it to your Spotify playlist. But
if you do, make sure you take off the bad words.
If you do, you're for sure 45 and up.
And deconstructing music.
Don't, please, no. He was the one that wasn't afraid to challenge those ideologies. He wasn't afraid to push back. He wasn't afraid to, but he did it in such a way that was so, like, that's what I want to be like,
Yeah, and I do agree with Carrie Nieuwhof. I think it's one thing to deconstruct, which is fine, but you need to make sure you reconstruct your faith back biblically.
Yes.
And I think one of the dangers that we're seeing is that people are creating, I think, a theology based on society, based on a theology that they think is morally acceptable, culturally acceptable, a theology that is more based on feeling. And so you're seeing this other extreme, which I think is toxic, as he said.
Sure.
And I think
it's a fine line.
It's a fine line, but I think we have to come back to biblical truth. And I think the church has really, it's I hate to say it's our fault, but I think we set it up for people to do so. Every Sunday I tell people at church, I said, hey, I could be up here preaching heresy. Bible check for yourself. Make sure that what I'm sharing is accurate, and that we're aligned biblically. And because I want people to search the scriptures. I don't want people to just believe something essentially because I told it.
This is not supposed to be a blind following.
No, but man, I know we talked about it in the first episode, but I think a lot of this has made me more of a self-aware leader.
For sure.
And examining myself, I said my motives, because I think we created this monster. And you said something, we're not careful. If this moment didn't happen, we would just continue to hand it down.
Generation to generation.
And I think it lacked authenticity.
Yes. I also think that we as believers, so not as leaders, but just as Christians, as people of faith, we need to take more responsibility for our own walks with Jesus. The church is there, the pastor is there to come alongside of us.
Yeah.
The mentors, the teachers, they're there to help us and equip us in our faith. But we have to do our due diligence of studying the scriptures, of putting in the time of putting in the work so that we have an understanding with the Lord of, what is it that he's teaching in this? What does this actually mean in context? And I do think that sometimes when we're in a place where we've been in the church for a long time, we get so comfortable with someone else just telling us and teaching us and us just kind of sitting back and like, yeah, cool.
Why we erect narcissistic leaders.
Yeah. Instead of like, okay, but have you dug in and thought for yourself? Like critical thinking in the healthiest way possible, right?
Yes.
Is necessary. And I think that sometimes we blame. It's not to discredit the things that we have faced if we are in a place of deconstruction and what got us there, but I also think that we tend to blame other entities versus like, I could have been the last 5 years really figuring out like, wait, what does that mean scripturally? Or what is the context of that? Or what was going on in society at the time when that was written? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To really equip ourselves and to know the scriptures ourselves.
And I think it's generational. I mean, if you were to break down the boomers, if you were to break down millennials, Generation Z, you know, the boomer, that whole generation, you did what was told. You didn't question authority. You didn't question the pastor.
For sure.
You kind of went with it. Millennials were in that, we're in that in-between phase where we still.
Submission was like, you couldn't ask anything. You
yeah.
couldn't push back.
But, you know, millennials, it's like we know what it was like to have to write in cursive, and we also know what it's like to have an iPad. And so we lived it.
Yeah.
And then Gen Z is like, I'm going to question everything. I'm going to question authority. And we grew accustomed to not having to answer questions.
Yes.
And leaders who are now having to answer questions, some of us, not me, but we don't like it. We don't
uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And we don't understand those uncomfortable moments are opportunities for us to lean in. Those opportunities of tension are moments to bring growth.
Yeah.
And I do think that, I don't know. I personally, I'm going to err on the side of, I think we needed it.
Yeah.
I think we need it as long as we're building it back up in the right way.
100%. I think healthy deconstruction, the purpose is to rebuild your faith in a stronger than it was.
What would you say has been the biggest blessing of deconstruction?
For myself?
In general, I would say overall. Yeah, for yourself.
For myself, I think it humbled me in a different way. I think it makes you really humble yourself because you get to a place where what I knew is not working and what I thought I knew is not working, and I'm not where I thought I would be, or whatever it looks like. But for me personally, I feel like it humbled me. I feel like it also grew my capacity for grace towards others. I came from a background where it was a lot of law and very little grace in the church. And so for me, I think I had to really undo it. And here's the thing. Deconstruction has become popular more recently, but some of us have been deconstructing for like 20 years. You know what I mean? Like the undoing for me started. Yeah, the undoing for me started, I want to say, at least 15 years ago. And so did I know that it was deconstruction at the time? No. I just thought the Lord was like, you need to like sit down, you know?
Yeah.
You know nothing. But I just I think it's a process. I don't think that deconstruction is something that is done overnight. If it's going to be healthy, if it's going to be like good seed on healthy soil. But yeah, I think for me, it also gave me a different heart for people because I wasn't viewing them through the lens of their sin or their mistakes, but more through the lens of like, the Lord has forgiven me from a lot, you know? And so.
No, that's good. That's good. I noticed that you are one of the most humblest person that I know.
Stop it right now.
And the most graceful.
I mean, you can attest to this because you met me kind of when I was still.
Oh my gosh, when I met you.
I know.
We had to pre-court. We had a pre-court
destination.
Okay,
but that's different, bro. That's different.
We had to keep. That's
different because I had walls up due to being hurt and traumatized by a relationship.
I know, but the church you came from, anyways,
was hardcore legalistic. Yes, that was my point.
Right. We totally said that.
Yes.
You know, the term deconstruction is interesting because I always used to use the term detox.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody ever wanted to come be a part of what we were doing or our ministry. And if they were coming from another church, one of the things that I would have them do is detox.
Mm-hmm.
I would tell them, you're going to do nothing for like 3 to 6 months. People didn't know what to do with that. You're going to not serve. You're not going to not pray on stage. You're not going to get a microphone.
Yeah.
You're not going to lay hands. I just want you to sit there and just receive and observe and learn our culture. Because I don't want you bringing whatever culture you just came from over here and trying to tell us, well, we've always done it that way. That is one thing that I can't stand. Well, we've always done it. That's why it's not working.
Guess what? Today you're not.
That's why it's not working.
Yeah. I think that people I've watched when we've said that to people, and people at first like didn't know what to do with it. And then at the end of it, when they were on the other side, they were like, thank you for not letting me jump right back in. Like I needed this time.
Because I felt like God was doing something in us that the that term deconstruction wasn't, wasn't around, and it was detox. And so I know that you and I, we definitely had to detox. And so if you're even deconstructing your faith right now, I'm going to be honest with you, and I've already said this, and I'll say it one more time. I don't think there's anything wrong with you deconstructing their faith. I don't think there's anything wrong with you questioning certain things, questioning certain things that you've seen, behaviors, actions, what you've heard all your life, as long as
your goal
your goal at the end of the day is to come to Jesus, to come back to the centrality of the scriptures, to come back to the centrality of who he is and what he's calling you to do, to come back to the church, to a Bible believing, healthy, spirit-filled church, and be in a place where you can continue to live out your faith and contribute your gifts and be utilized. That at the end of the day, I think is healthy. Yeah. And I think it's necessary for many people.
Yes.
But you don't want to stay deconstructed. I was thinking, like, what's a food that you eat that's there's like, aren't that like a popular thing? Like, you can have a deconstructed sandwich.
A sub.
A deconstructed sub. Oh, that's what you get at Jersey Mike's.
Yeah. Sub in a tub.
It's sub in a tub is all right, but man, you need that bread.
At some point you need carbs.
At some point you need carbs. At some point you got to reconstruct that.
You need the carbs because good carbs are healthy for you. I think sometimes when you're in deconstruction and in that season, your goal may not even be to reconstruct yet, because sometimes we're so angry at God, for the things that have been, for feeling like we've been deceived, even though he didn't cause the deception. And it takes a minute to get to a place, but just know that if you're in deconstruction, you're going to come to a fork in the road. Yeah, at some point in the process, you're going to have to choose. Like, I remember being in a place a few years ago where I was so angry with the Lord for the things that I was enduring. And I was on a phone call with somebody, and they literally said to me, well, Ashley, you're just going to have to choose. You're either going to follow God's way or you're not. Like, it was very black and white. And it was definitely for me what I needed to hear, and very confrontational with the Lord. Like, listen, you can stay in this as long as you want, but at some point you're going to have to choose one or the other, and hopefully you choose the better option.
Well, and I think sometimes why people don't reconstruct is when they do go to the scriptures, they find things that they necessarily don't like, and because they don't like it, it doesn't align up with their belief system.
Sure.
And so they kind of throw out the baby with the bathwater, or they create their own theology. I think that's also dangerous.
Yes.
I think we have to stick to scripture, and we have to stick to what the word says, and coming back to that. And I was just thinking, I remember when we planted, we're celebrating 3 years in November. And we started off with a great group of people. It was like 9 of us. Some of us knew each other for a long time. Some of us had just met. And all of us had just come from some crazy, toxic, hurtful situation.
Yeah, pretty large percentage of our church, I feel like.
And we still all weren't even fully together yet. Like, I don't even think we were fully healed. You definitely felt like that
sense of like,
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. Are you guys still healed? Are you guys healed now? I just want to know. Is we're all good?
There was definitely that sense of like.
And you're on staff. That's scary.
I don't know if this is safe yet. Yeah, for sure.
And I know that the Lord was really challenging me to be sensitive in how to steer and pastor. Yes, this group of 9 that God had brought us, and I think we were all growing it together. But at the end of the day, we all came back to this idea of we love God and we love people and we want to build His church.
Well, and I think that
we want to do it the right way.
When people are in process, as pastors, we can take it very personally, and it's not about us at all. Unless it is. Unless you contributed to the problem and you need to own it. But if it's not, like if someone's coming into your church and they're in a place of deconstruction, like just give them the margin to do that. You know what I mean? As long as they're not coming in and causing disorder and stuff like that, just they belong to the Lord.
You also can't walk in.
Us.
You also can't come into a church where everybody believes a certain thing, and then you're going to be that one person. And you're just going to go completely against the grain and everything. There also is a wise way of doing so.
Yes, there's a wise way.
Tell us what you were thinking.
What I was thinking, we're talking about healthy deconstruction. I think it's very important if you're trying to do it in a way that is fruitful and that produces good results in your life. To be very careful about the voices that you let into that process.
Very good.
Because we are human and we will do things on purpose and with right or wrong intention. And sometimes when we're deconstructing, we will purposely choose to surround ourselves with people that will come into agreement
with what we feel,
with
and
what we
think.
feel, and we justify our way through it and want to stay in our sin if we're in it, because we're deconstructing. And the purpose of deconstructing is not to have a free pass to sin and to stay in it.
So
the purpose is to reform really your theology, to reconstruct the things that maybe need to be spit out and thrown out. You chew the meat, you spit out the bone type of thing. But I think it's important to surround yourself with people that are going to call you higher. I think you and I had people in our lives who were not afraid to be like, I get that's how you feel, but that's not truth.
Yeah.
And I'll sit with you in the feeling for a second, and then you got to move on, and we've got to move forward, and you've got to do the work of healing that. And so, I just think it's important that if you are in that place, or you're starting to walk in that place, or into that season, that you surround yourself with the right people who are going to speak life and truth and empathize with you, but not let you stay where you're at.
That's good. That's good. I think that's all we got. That's good. I mean, there's a ton of podcasts and a ton of articles out there that go fully in depth. We just wanted to have a conversation about where we were at and just some of the experiences that we've had with our church. So, man, two pretty hard podcasts in a row. But hey, if you're still watching and listening, thank you so much. We're so grateful that you were watching, and we just thank you. And hopefully we will see you again soon. So subscribe, share, leave us a comment at the end, and we hope to see you soon. God bless. Love you guys.